On the morning of April 7th, 2025, three men in dark suits walked into a Kobe police station. One of them was missing parts of three fingers. They were carrying a folded letter. And what that letter announced, that the oldest criminal empire on Earth had just surrendered to itself, was something no government, no law, and no police force had been able to accomplish in 100 years. Which raises a question. How do you bring down an organization with 184,000 members, stitched into every corner of Japanese life? An organization that fed the hungry when the government couldn't, that ran public institutions in plain sight, that built a loyalty system so powerful, its soldiers chose to cut off their own fingers to prove they were still loyal. You don't. It does it to itself. This is how it happens. These are the levels of the Yakuza. Level 1, the Kobun, the sun. You're 22 years old, and the men who are about to own your life have never seen your face before. In a back room above a Kobe office, a room no outsider has ever filmed, you kneel across from a man twice your age. Between you sit 2 cups of sake. His is filled to the brim. Yours is barely poured. The difference is the entire point. You each drink. You've just performed the sakazuki, the ceremony. The man across from you is now your father, your oyabun, and you are his child, his kobun. You owe him your life. There's an old line in the organization. If your boss tells you the passing crow is white, you agree. You don't argue. You don't think. You become what they call a teppodama, a bullet, waiting to be aimed. Remember that word. It will come back at the very end of this video, in a way you will not expect. This sounds like cult behavior because it is, but it's also the oldest cult in the world still operating at scale. At its peak in 1963, this organization had 184,000 members, more men than the active-duty United States Marine Corps fields today. Your job, at the bottom, is to disappear. You sleep in the office. You pour drinks, light cigarettes, answer phones. You bow to every man who walks into the room, even the ones who ignore you, because the silent count of your bows is how you are being graded. And somewhere above you, a man is preparing to hand you a needle. Level 2, the Wakashū, the mark. Your first real commitment to the organization isn't a crime. It's a tattoo, not a sleeve, not an arm piece. Irizumi, the full body, back, chest, shoulders, thighs, dragons coiling around your ribs, koi climbing your spine, tigers across your collarbone, peonies on your forearms, inked by hand, one needle push at a time, over hundreds of hours, across many months. It's expensive, it's agonizing. And when it's finished, you can never take it back. Here's what those hours of pain actually buy you. Hotel pools, hot springs, swimming lessons for your kids. You have just chosen a life where you physically cannot blend back into normal society, and you will feel it every summer for the rest of your life. But that's the design. The Irizumi isn't art, it's a fence. You have put a wall between yourself and the world, on purpose. Because the moment retreat becomes impossible, the family becomes the only thing you have left. You're a Wakashū now, a young man. You begin to learn how money actually moves inside the organization. The monthly tributes, the seasonal envelopes, the specific way a senior member accepts a gift without looking at it. You are not collecting yet. You are watching, memorizing, being shown the shape of a pyramid whose apex you will never see. And somewhere above you, a senior just made a mistake. You are about to learn what this code actually costs. Level 3, the Kyodai, the knife. You've been promoted. You're a Kyodai now, a big brother. You have your own small crew of shate who pour your sake and answer your phone. And then, you make your first real mistake. The code doesn't care what, it only cares that something went wrong. And it reflects on your boss. You go back to that room above the office, alone. You spread a clean white cloth on a low table. You place your left hand on it, palm down. You pick up a tanto, a short, ceremonially sharp blade. You line it against the top joint of your left pinky, and you cut. You wrap the piece in the cloth, you fold it like a gift. You walk to your boss's office, still bleeding, and you place the package on his desk. You bow, you apologize. You do not ask for it back. This is Yubitsume, And here's the part nobody tells you. It isn't punishment. The pinky matters because of swordsmanship. A samurai's grip on a katana depends most on the little finger. Cut it, and your hand weakens. Your blade slows. You become more dependent on the men around you to protect you in a fight. That is the entire point of the ritual. Yubitsume isn't destruction, it's binding. Every missing finger in this organization is a man who needs his family more than he did yesterday. Every bleeding pinky is a contract signed in bone. And this is where the Yakuza's genius lives. They didn't build loyalty by demanding it. They built a system where disloyalty was physically impossible because you had already cut away the parts of yourself that could survive alone. Every serious criminal organization has something that holds its men inside. The Italian Cosa Nostra has Omerta, the code of silence. The 'Ndrangheta of Calabria has blood initiation, brothers by oath, often by birth. The Russian Vori have tattoos, a language of rank written across their skin. But none of them demanded that a man physically disable his own body to remain in the organization. In the Yakuza, loyalty wasn't just sworn, it was carved. You looked at your own hand every morning and remembered what you chose. Ask yourself honestly, you are 28 years old. Every man you respect is in this room with you. Every woman you have ever loved was introduced to you by someone in this organization. Your boss is the closest thing to a father you have. And the alternative, the life outside this room, is a life you stopped preparing for 6 years ago. Would you have cut? Because when the cost of staying was a single joint of one finger, and the cost of leaving was every relationship you had ever built, most men, in most centuries, have made the cut. The men who walked into that Kobe police station last April weren't born with 9 fingers. They earned every missing joint. Level 4. The Shateigashira, the Shadow Institution. You run a region now, a Shateigashira, second lieutenant, 200 men beneath you across a prefecture. You collect the tributes. You settle the disputes the men below you can't solve. You answer to exactly one man, the Wakagashira, and your office has a sign on the door. The Yakuza don't hide. Most Yamaguchi-gumi buildings are labeled. Foreign news crews have filmed in Yakuza reception rooms. This is not the Sinaloa cartel. Nothing about this empire was ever underground. That was the deal. For decades, Japanese police knew exactly where every office was, who ran it, and how to reach it. And in return, the Yakuza behaved like an institution. One winter before dawn, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck the city of Kobe. Over 6,000 people died. 300,000 were left homeless. The government's disaster response was slow, chaotic, and days late. The Yamaguchi-gumi responded in hours. Trucks pulled up to their Kobe headquarters before the sun came up. The parking lot became a distribution center. According to the New York Times, the organization was handing out approximately 8,000 meals a day. Bread, eggs, powdered milk, diapers, delivered by scooter through streets the government could not yet reach. While the self-defense forces were still assembling, the largest criminal organization in Japan was feeding the city of Kobe. You heard that correctly. The most powerful criminal organization on earth ran a public relations campaign aimed at grandmothers and 5-year-olds. For 70 years, it worked. And then the government decided usefulness was no longer enough. Level 5. The Wakagashira. The break. You are the number 2. Wakagashira, First Lieutenant. If you are sitting in this chair inside the Yamaguchi-gumi, you control half of Japan. You answer to exactly one man, the Kumicho. But you are not just his deputy. You are also the man who collects. Every month, every affiliated subfamily inside the Yamaguchi-gumi pays tribute upward. For decades, the tributes were survivable. Around 800,000 yen a month in the early years of your career. Then, under the 6th Kumicho, the number climbed. Then it climbed again. Within a decade, some subfamilies were paying over 2.5 million yen every month, plus seasonal gifts, plus contributions for the boss's birthday, plus donations for festivals. Estimates published in Al Jazeera suggested the boss's personal cut ran in the range of $8 million a year. You, sitting in the Wakagashira's chair, are the man holding the clipboard when it all comes in. And that's how the empire started to crack. On the day the Yamaguchi-gumi celebrated its 100th anniversary, 13 of its largest subfamilies walked out. The split was led by a man named Kunio Inoue. The grievances had been building for years, crushing monthly dues. The feeling that the organization had stopped being a brotherhood and become a tax collection operation. Inoue took roughly 3,000 men with him and founded a new group, the Kobe Yamaguchi Gumi. They kept the original logo. They claimed to represent the true spirit of the founders. Overnight, the largest criminal organization in Japan split in two. What followed was the largest Yakuza war in 30 years. Shootings, stabbings, firebombings, 150 separate incidents across the decade that followed. The police designated both sides as gangs at war. Offices were shut down. Phones were tapped. Fundraising was banned. Then, slowly, the breakaway faction started to lose. A decade in, the Kobe Yamaguchi Gumi, which had launched with roughly 3,000 men, was down to around 120. Defections, arrests, old age, men just quietly walking away. On that spring morning we opened this video with, senior members of the main Yamaguchi Gumi walked into that Kobe police station and handed over the letter. That letter was not the war ending. That letter was the war running out of men to fight it. And what caused the men to run out was not police bullying. Level 6. The Saikō Komon. The Trap. Saikō Komon, Senior Advisor, the Inner Cabinet. Beside you sit the lawyers, the accountants, the headquarters chief. Men who kept this empire running on paper. For decades, this was the most powerful room in the organization. Because this room handled the legitimate fronts: construction, real estate, banking, politics. The interface between the shadow institution and the legal economy. Then, one year, every prefecture in Japan activated something called the exclusion ordinances. Overnight, it became illegal for anyone to knowingly do business with a Yakuza member. Landlords could not rent to you. Banks could not hold your account. Phone companies could not sell you a SIM card. Golf courses could not let you play. The only exceptions the law carved out were electricity, water, and gas. Because without them, you would die. The Japanese government outlawed almost every civilian interaction with you, except the 3 things required to keep you breathing. And here is the part that breaks men. You could leave. You could burn your sash, cut your boss out of your life, tell your wife you were done. Japanese law would not stop you walking out the door. But for 5 years after you left, 5 entire years, you were still legally classified as Yakuza. No landlord could rent to you under your real name. No bank could open an account. No phone company could sell you a line. The exclusion didn't end when your loyalty did. You could quit the organization. You could not quit the mark. The Japanese government didn't outlaw the Yakuza. They did something worse. They outlawed doing anything with them. And then they made sure that walking away from the code wouldn't buy you a normal life back. And this is the pattern. This is why this channel exists. Every empire rises on a code. Every empire falls on the same code. You just have to know where to look. The fight used to be Yakuza versus the police. Now it's Yakuza versus society. Society is winning. Level 7. The Kumicho. The boss. You've reached it. You're a Kumicho, an oyabun of an entire family. The desk you sit behind has, over the course of your career, received hundreds of folded white cloths. Packages handed across its surface by men who believed they owed you something they could only repay in bone. You have spent your entire adult life being trusted with pieces of other men's bodies. There are 25 men in Japan holding this rank right now. The National Police Agency has their names, their offices, and their photographs on file. Each one watches his family shrink by roughly 1,000 members every single year. And beneath you, there is nobody coming. Japanese kids aren't joining the Yakuza anymore, not the way their fathers did. The Sakazuki ceremony, the tattoos, the pinky rituals, the monthly tributes, the decades-long climb from Shate to Kyodai to Shateigashira. That system required young men willing to trade their entire future for a place inside a code. Those men have found something else. They're joining something called Tokuryu, anonymous online crime networks that recruit teenagers through social media, line groups, signal channels, encrypted Japanese messaging apps. A Tokuryu recruit takes no oath, meets no boss, gets no tattoo, and keeps all 10 fingers. The organization exists for a week, runs a fraud scheme targeting elderly Japanese victims, splits the money, dissolves. The next week, a new group forms with different members. The Yakuza aren't being defeated, they're being replaced by something faster, colder, and incapable of honor. You are now sitting at the top of a kingdom that, beneath you, is a line graph slanting towards zero, and you are the last generation of men who will ever sit where you are sitting. One man sits above you, above all 25 of you, who has watched every second of this unfold. He has watched it for longer than most of the men inside his own organization have been alive. And he sees, more clearly than anyone alive, that he is the last of his species. Level 8. The Rokudaime, the last emperor. Every level you have climbed, you have been climbing toward him. His name is Kenichi Shinoda. Inside the organization, they call him Shinobu Tsukasa. He was born in 1942 on the southern island of Kyushu, in the middle of the Pacific War. His father was not a gangster. Shinoda graduated from Oita Prefectural Fisheries High School and went to work for a local fishing company. He was, before anything else, the son of the sea. In 1962, at the age of 20, he left the fishery, traveled to Nagoya, and joined a Yamaguchi Gumi affiliate called the Hirota Gumi. 1 year later, in 1963, the Yakuza hit its all-time peak of 184,000 members. He entered the organization at the exact moment it became the largest private criminal force in the world. In 1969, during a gang war between the Hirota Gumi and a rival syndicate called Dai Nippon Heiwakai, Kenichi Shinoda killed a rival Yakuza boss. Not with a gun, not with a knife, with a katana, the traditional sword of the samurai. He served 13 years in prison for it. He came out of those 13 years with a reputation and a philosophy. In 1984, he founded his own subfamily, the Kodokai, with another rising man named Kiyoshi Takayama. Remember that name, it comes back. Together, Shinoda and Takayama built the Kodokai into one of the most powerful factions in the syndicate. In 2005, at age 63, Shinoda inherited the top chair. 40,000 men, hundreds of affiliated companies, an empire stitched into every prefecture in Japan. 4 months later, he was back in prison. 6 years for a gun possession charge tied to one of his bodyguards. He was released in 2011, the year the exclusion ordinances went nationwide. From that point forward, he watched his empire die. He watched the Yamakin Gumi break away on the 100th anniversary of his own organization. He watched a war consume a decade. He watched the membership collapse by more than 90%. He watched the teenagers of Japan choose line groups over Sakazuki ceremonies. And then, last April, he watched his Wakagashira of 20 years step aside. The same Kiyoshi Takayama who had founded the Kodokai with him 41 years earlier. The last partner of his working life quietly moved out of the chair. Which means this entire time, this entire collapse, the man at the top of the Yakuza has been doing something almost no one outside the organization knows about. In July 2013, the Yamaguchi Gumi launched an internal newsletter, an 8-page magazine called Yamaguchi Gumi Shinpo, distributed only to full members. The front page carries a monthly address written by the Kumicho himself. Inside the magazine, other senior members write columns on fishing trips, pages of satirical haiku poetry, tips on the strategy board games Go and Shogi. Kenichi Shinoda, 84-year-old fisherman's son, 6th Kumicho of the Yamaguchi Gumi, is writing the editorial of an internal newsletter read by criminals who keep diaries of their fishing trips in the same pages. And in those editorials, Shinoda writes to his men in the language of a CEO watching his company die. He tells them times are hard. He tells them they cannot rely on their brand. He tells them the young must observe traditional values, loyalty, discipline, endurance, or the organization will not survive the decade. The most powerful criminal on earth is writing a corporate turnaround memo to men who still cut off their own fingers. The boy from the Oita fishing village, still there, under the suit and the chair and the pieces of other men's fingers. A man at the summit of the oldest code in organized crime, writing about discipline, to an audience of men who catch fish. And on April 7, 2025, at 83 years old, he watched his own lieutenants walk into a police station, carrying a folded letter, declaring that the war inside his kingdom was finished. An empire that had survived earthquakes, tsunamis, tax laws, rival wars, and a century of police surveillance, quietly handing its own letter of exhaustion to the same authorities who had been hunting it for generations. Remember what they called you at level 1? A teppodama, a bullet. For 100 years, the men at the top of this organization aimed the bullets, and they never missed. Because bullets that cannot choose who they strike cannot miss. You are watching the last man with the authority to aim finally lower his hand. And when it falls, so do you. That is the end of the Yakuza, an 84-year-old fisherman's son at the top of the oldest code in organized crime, watching the code run out of people to bind. Every empire has levels. Some empires run out of climbers. The Yakuza were brutal. They were criminals. They killed. They extorted. They bled people. For 100 years, the Yakuza were also known. Their offices had signs. Their bosses had names. Their codes had rules. When something went wrong, there was a man on a desk you could go find. The teenagers replacing them have none of those things. No offices, no names, no codes, no desks. Just encrypted messages, disposable accounts, and elderly Japanese victims who lose their entire life savings to someone they will never identify. And nobody can threaten. This is not a Japanese story. It is the story of what happens to every institution that chose the code over the contract. The honored monster is being replaced by the faceless one. The Yakuza just happened to be the first empire it's finishing with. The rest are next. The Yakuza needed men to become something. Rituals, fathers, blood sons, an entire system of bodies bound to a code. The next empire on the list has all of that too. The blood oath, the code of silence, the family hierarchy, the men who can never leave. But where the Yakuza spent 100 years wanting to be seen, hanging signs on their doors, handing meals to grandmothers, performing chivalry in public, this one spent the same 100 years, making sure nobody knew it existed. It runs 80% of the cocaine in Europe. Italian researchers at Demoscopica estimate its annual revenue is larger than Deutsche Bank and McDonald's combined. And most Americans could not tell you its name. If this is the first echelon file you've watched, this is what this channel does. The mechanism, not the spectacle. Every empire rises on a code. Every empire falls on the same code. If you want to understand how power actually works, stay here. Next file. The levels of the Ndrangheta. Every empire has levels.